Welcome back to ShredMentor Live. I'm your host, Jason Aaron Wood, and tonight we're going to be getting into, well, as usual, way too many things in too short a time, but we're going to be talking a lot about a lot of actionable methods that you can use to gradually but relatively quickly start to establish meaningful relationships on the fretboard and start to approach fretboard mastery. Now, first things first. I hate the word mastery. It's, you know, in the song by Kansas, Carry On Wayward Son, there's a lyric that goes, if I claim to be a wise man, then it surely means that I don't know. And I feel like that really sums up the gist of why I don't like the term mastery when it comes to such a broad, far-reaching skill set like playing an instrument. It's not... there are some people who I would say are certainly masters of what they do. Yngwie Malmsteen comes to mind. He not only, forged the way for many, he wasn't the only person doing neoclassical type stuff, but he was certainly one of the people that made it so all of us were aware of this style, and he really pioneered a lot of things in that way. And let me hop over here to the control center here so that I can see your comments if you have any. And let me know if you can hear me, because that would be a shame if I had to say all that over again, but that happens and I'm happy to. Anyway, mastery though, it's not the right word for what we're doing. I would prefer we aim for fretboard fluency. All right, and I used the word mastery in the name of this because that's what I think you think it's going to be called, because that's what everybody's selling. Fretboard mastery. I'm sure it's the name of multiple books. Yeah, you're not going to master the whole fretboard in every possible style, and that's what I mean when I say that if you think you've mastered something, you haven't looked off into the horizon, because every time I learn something new, I find there's so much more to learn. And so after 30 years of playing and progressing steadily, I have found that I don't really believe in mastery, to be perfectly honest. You just always have more room to improve something else. Even what you've already mastered, there's actually still room for personal improvement even in that area. So I do believe one person can master one style, or at least achieve such a level of control that it would be considered a master by many, many people. A couple people have referred to me as a master or something, and I'm not. But I'm good at what I do, and I'm fluent, and that is the thing I hope to impart to you, because being a master doesn't serve me. That's like I couldn't even brag about that if I wanted to. You don't even get bragging rights being a master. You need everyone to do your advertising for you, and that, it doesn't count for anything if you go around proclaiming yourself the master. Show enough, if you've seen The Last Dragon. Yeah, who's the master? I don't know, but you should never answer me. It's just, there's nothing to be gained from that. But being fluent at what you intend to convey is super useful, and I've always found that useful. So, a little bait and switch for you tonight. I'm not going to fail to deliver here, but I want to be very clear. I know I said the word mastery to get you here because I think that's the wording everyone has in their head, but that's not really what we're doing. That's not the task. The books and lessons that claim to impart that, they can't. There's no way you'd be able to afford them if they did all that, because the amount of, by the time if they started today trying to do a course that would impart that, you're only going to get maybe mastery in one style or a couple of styles at best, and it's going to be a long while before that much material was complete and ready to go, and by that point, everyone will have moved on. So I just want to be clear about that. That's not, mastery it's this illusion. It's black and white thinking, really. You just, either you got it or you don't, and like that's more mythology. That isn't how this works. We're learning a language. Music is a language, and I'm not saying that metaphorically. It's a language. You're conveying emotional thoughts. It's sort of a one-way language. You're the speaker, the other person's the listener. So you say it, in a sense, they receive it. They get the message. They feel the emotion that you're trying to paint for them. But it's very much a language, and so how fluent are you in what you're trying to convey to your listener? So, going back to probably everybody's first day on the guitar, inspired by somebody else, making it look so easy, you pick it up and it's like, oh God, what the heck? And this is why I'm using this tonight, my 10 string, just to really drive the points home that I'm going to share with you tonight. I started with a 6 string just like anybody, but this will work with you if you're on a 4 string bass, 5 string bass, 6 string bass, or guitar, 7 string, 8 string, 9 string, or 10 string, or even more. Okay, and I'm not talking about 12 string because that's just a 6 string with double courses. But yeah, it's 10 separate courses just to drive the point home. You're not going to be mapping this whole thing out and have this fretboard diagram in your head. That's not, if that's the illusion you had in your mind about how that works and how somebody keeps, how do they do that? They don't do that. That's how you find your way around on the fretboard. You're not doing it that way. That's not the way it might look in a book when they show you this whole overwhelming fretboard diagram that has all of the entire notes, all of the entire fretboard. That is not what a person's doing when they make it look so easy. That, I guarantee you, would bog them down and make them work a lot more slowly if they had to do that every time. So, anyway, with that out of the way, what we're really aiming for is fluency, not mastery, because that's an elusive, that's the hunt for the Holy Grail. We're not going to waste our time with that. We're going to get you some real-world results and abilities. All right, so let us begin. A couple of, 3 universals I want to start with before we get into anything. All right, first of all, always think in scale degree numbers. Don't worry so much about the specific note name, what letter that's not useful. The number, where that note falls within the scale, that is what I recommend for every scale, at least, especially diatonic scales. Diatonic is basically where all our chords and harmony come from. When you harmonize with thirds, you're using diatonic scales. Major and minor are examples of 2 different kinds of diatonic scales. The modes in those 2 types of scales, those are all diatonic scales. Harmonic minor and the variations on these scales. Harmonic major, Hungarian minor, things like that. These are all 7-note and thus diatonic scales. Think of them in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1 is the root note. All the others are numbered in a hierarchy, and it tells you what the relationship of them is. So you need to know these numbers, okay? And we're going to get back into these quite a bit in the specific activities you can do to solidify this knowledge later. Right, but always think in scale degrees is number 1. The second universal is use sequences most of the time, not just plain ascending and descending scales. Okay, yes, once in a while play your scales up and down just to make sure you know the map and can find it without having to look anymore. But frankly, that's not going to serve you very well as a musician. That's not musical skill. That's not music. That's just reciting a list of notes in order. That's not. No one wants to hear that for the most part either. That's, aside from the occasional ripping scale run, which is exciting, that's not going to serve you. And in fact, the scale run itself is going to be a lot more interesting if it has a little more variation than it's not, up and down for a really long run. Most of the time isn't really what you're going to need, even for the sake of coming up with good vocabulary. So, yeah, sequences. As if I'm sure that's, I don't know, I wish I was counting, but this is probably the 1,000th time I've said sequences in this series. Only 38 episodes here, but yeah, that's the tool. Once again, that's the tool for this as well, for your scale knowledge, as well as for your speed training and shred practice, and for your improvisational and compositional vocabulary. It's kind of the tool for everything, for riff writing, for solo writing, everything. So yeah, use sequences most of the time, not just ascending and descending scales. That's our second universal here. The third and final universal thing I'm going to say here is practice the transitions between the phrases that you practice, not just the separate patterns, okay? So, for example, if I'm playing a sequence of thirds from in E minor, right? And then I, do, and then I practice the next mode over. And then I just stop and conveniently get my hand all nice and comfy before I start again. That's not a luxury you're going to be afforded in real life. That's not how this is going to play out. That's not those 2 separate pieces that you can't figure out how to put together in the end, because that's what the end result of that is. That's how that works out. Hey, Vicky, horns up to you. Yeah, Vicky, by the way, is a DJ on Metal Devastation Radio. She has a show on still Saturday night, I think, Vicky. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 8 p.m. Eastern. But it's Lady Red's Bath of Blood. Really killer music, so you should check that out whenever you can. She has really good tasting music, so you should check it out. It's always a good show. So anyway, taking these two phrases, right? By themselves, not particularly useful until you practice the transition between them, which has a couple other challenges that you're not preparing yourself for if you just play them by themselves. So here's the example here. The stretch or the slide and the contracting of your hand so that you're not picking your whole hand up as a block and moving it, all rigidly. It's a delicate dance of the individual fingertips. So you're going to have your hand kind of normal, you're going to have it stretched, you're going to have it contracted at different points. I'm sorry, I need a better noise gate setting on this amp right now. But yeah, it's very important to practice the transitions between them, or else you're not really getting much out of this, and you're not going to be able to use this stuff nearly as well, because it's all going to be choppy, and notes are going to have to get cut off so that you can pick your whole hand up and move it over there because you weren't prepared in the first place to get from point A to point B. So, contract, stretch, that's contract, slide, right? Because of knowing where each shape is and which finger comes into play with each of these. There's motor memory here, but I'm connecting motor memory for each of these separate parts. So I have practiced each of these shapes separately, but you can't neglect that step where you purposely tie them together, because otherwise you're never going to be able to use them together, because you're going to stumble over. It's the first time you needed a finger that's not available, you're going to end up tripping up, and it's going to be a train wreck. It's all going to fall apart. And because of this simple universal, there's really no reason for that. Just practice the transitions between the things you practice too, which means you're going to have to deliberately combine the things you're practicing separately into one thing. You're summing them together. I call this the consolidation strategy. Okay, that is the three universals. Always think in scale degree numbers. Forget about note names. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Even minor pentatonic is 7 notes, but you're removing the 2 and the 6. So A minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A minor pentatonic is just A, C, D, E, G. So no B, no F. No 2 and no 6, as I said. There's still 7. Those numbers still line up to where they would have been in the regular minor scale or Aeolian scale. So that's first. Scale degrees all the way, sequences most of the time, and practice the transitions. Just from now on, do all 3 of those things all the time, and you'll be a lot better off. Now, into the other things that we need to establish first, okay? And I'm going to think of this as your ability, your recognition of established patterns. So first off, what we're talking about here, these established patterns, I'm talking about interval relationships. So first off, scales, yes, we're dealing with scales. A scale, once again, as I said earlier, I refer to it as a list. It's a list of notes that go together to make this recipe, this sound, this range of emotional responses, versus some other scale that gives you a different range of emotional responses. But a scale is a formula, it's a recipe. Notes that are this far apart make this sound. Notes that are this other, where they're all this far apart, doesn't really matter what range they're sitting in. What key you're in is a different color altogether, but really harmonic minor, for example, is harmonic minor no matter which of the 12 chromatic starting points that you consider the root note. Harmonic minor has all of its notes in a very specific spacing, which makes it sound that way. You're very welcome, Vicky. Sorry, I just saw your response. So yeah, the spacing is what makes the sound. So be paying attention to that kind of thing, because that's the recipe right there for whatever sound you're trying to make. The scale is a recipe. It's a formula of notes. So when I talk about that kind of thing, all right, so I said that thinking in scale degrees. The major scale is simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And just by default, that means automatically it's whole step, half step, whole step, half step. All right, so 2 whole steps, 1 half step, 3 whole steps, 1 half step. That formula, that's the major scale. Automatically by default, since the whole system of Western music theory is based on the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actually means whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's it. Okay, so if I take the major scale and flat the 7, I'm not being random about this. This just happens to be something called the Mixolydian scale, which is also the scale you get if you start on the 5th of that scale. But anyway, Mixolydian is also a scale in its own right. Now, the formula for Mixolydian is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, because that's what happened to the original major scale to make that scale, okay? The minor scale is like the major scale, but the 3rd, 6th, and 7th are all flat. So the minor scale recipe is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, okay? You don't have to memorize all this. I'm just trying to illustrate a point here. Everything's based on the major scale, so what we do to the major scale to get that other sound, this is how we get the recipe for that scale. You don't need to know all these, not yet, but you do need to know the ones you're going to be using. So I would definitely recommend major, minor, and whatever other modes or something, or harmonic minor. So it's a good way. We're going to get into a strategy for dealing with this so that you're not overwhelmed, because there's a lot of scales out there and they're all useful for something. They might not be useful for what you need to do in order to make the music that you have inside of you. They don't all make the sound you want to make, so you don't have to worry about all of them. I probably deal with maybe about 20 scales total in my entire vocabulary. Depends on what I'm trying to do. I'm estimating. But anyway, yeah, so even out of that, when you look at the table of contents in your scales book, how many are there? Oh my God, I don't have to learn all that? No, you don't. Nope, I want to get you making the music you want to make. That's what my goal here is, not to make you a walking encyclopedia of random trivial knowledge that you can't even use. I'd rather you be really good at using maybe 2 or 3 scales than turn into that walking encyclopedia. Okay, so anyway, interval relationships then, okay? Knowing what the formula for your scale is, okay? So that's going to be what we're talking about here, okay? So when your ability to recognize the established patterns that are these interval relationships. Being able to play an entire octave of the scale is a good one, just being able to do that. But more importantly, that's frankly even a lot to bite off in one bite, don't bite off more than you can chew is what I'm referring to here. There are easier to work with patterns they have names that are already well established, except for some reason guitarists don't hear about them. Other string instrument players, violinists, violists, cellists, they all deal with this all the time. A mandolin player would have to deal with this too, and they're scale fragments. Okay, so there is a trichord, which is a 3-note scale fragment. So if you just go there, that's called a trichord. The next 3 notes down, there's a trichord, there's a trichord, there's a trichord, there's a trichord. Tri meaning 3, of course, which is pretty useful considering that many guitar scales are approached in a 3-note per string fashion. So you should know your trichords, because that's what you're going to be playing. That's what each string is going to offer you before you have to move on to the next string. That's a trichord, that's a name. You might as well start to memorize the order they happen in. That's one way to do this, right? The next shape, though. Let's get into these scale fragments and their names and what they consist of, all right, and how you might play them, too. The tetrachord. Tetra means 4. A tetrachord is basically, we start from A for each of these. A, B, C, D. We can do a 4-finger per string approach, although I admit that will be hard, right out of the gate at least. There's a tetrachord from B, still in A minor. From C, also known as the first 4 notes of the C major scale there. D, E, the hardest one of all, from the 6th of the scale, if you're in minor. 3 whole steps in a row. From G. And that's all 7, because the next one is A. All right, so remember, scale degrees. There's only 7 notes in the scale. There's going to be 7 of each of these then. There's going to be 7 trichords, 7 tetrachords. Now you could also do a 3-note per string approach and tap that other note, which is fun. So you go right? So anyway, yeah, pretty easy way to kind of approach that, and you don't have to learn any extra motor memory or do any weird stretching or anything like that, like I did in the first place. Okay, but then we did 3, we did 4. What's coming next? 5, the pentachord. This is probably something you'll deal with more within the next shape, which is the hexachord. But pentachord is just a 5-note scale fragment. So you could take 4 notes here, and then tap. You could also pick, slide, and then tap. Basically sliding with the fretting hand between 2 3-note per string positions, and tap 1 more note after that. Can't say I've done that too much either, but just looking for ways to do it. It's different interesting ideas that you might be able to, you might come up with your own interesting ideas by trying an approach like that. More often than not, I end up just doing this within a regular 3-note per string kind of pattern. I just find it a lot easier. It's a nice 8-beat pattern too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it makes it nice and 4/4 friendly. So that's the pentachord. Then there's the hexachord, which is basically 2 trichords in a row, just 6 notes. I default to E minor, by the way. 6 notes. Really kind of asking for triplets or sextuplets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and. So yeah, each of those has its own use, and it's kind of useful to use it just as the layout for the notes. You don't have to play all the notes in this order or anything. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with a trichord, just like again, sequences, a 1, 3, 2, 3. Since last week's thing was about pedal point. So, 1, 3, 2, 3, 4. Here's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. What if I just do blank 3, 2, 3 after everything? That's basically what I'm doing here. So I'm just moving around to all the other available notes within the hexachord while doing pedal point with the 2 and the 3 of the scale. I can do it from other modes. So anyway, yeah, a lot of cool stuff you can use. These are just, you don't have to play the scale in order. Remember, we're getting out of that habit. We should use sequences whenever possible. But this gives you a little idea of like a little tiny map where you can zoom in on the map. Where are all the notes? You're not going to use all the notes all the time. That's going to be a mess. No one wants to hear that. Once again, using a narrower range in the moment of notes is going to make for a much better melody. Frankly, just saying. For the most part, there's always an exception to anything. So yes, we're not gonna split hairs here. But for the most part, you'll come up with much better melodies if you don't try to think, where's all the notes? No, we're not going to use all those. Let's use a few. All right. So that's the first part. Right? Your scale fragments. They're common everywhere else except for guitar instruction for some reason, but they're still a viable piece of knowledge that, well, as a guitar player, you probably haven't even encountered it very much, except for maybe in my show where I talk about hexachords a lot. But a hexachord is just one of the forms. 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, 6 notes. As soon as you get to 7 notes, you're dealing with the whole scale because the scale has 7 notes. But anyway, know about your trichords, tetrachords, pentachords, hexachords, and use them as source material, because that is what a lot of your sequence, if I limit this sequence to only 5 notes in a row here, and then I play the and play the actual melody of the sequence in whatever order that sequence says to go in, I can come up with interesting melodies. If I start here, I end here. What's the relationship between those notes? I start in here. What if I do a sequence of thirds within only 5 notes? A. There's the 5. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5. Interesting. Kind of playing off of the power chord, relationship. 1, 3, 1 and 5. How long a phrase is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, neat. 6 is a multiple of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I can do it from somewhere else. Right? So you can come up with stuff very fast if you allow yourself to selectively narrow your criteria. Get some specific criteria about what you are going to limit yourself to, and then then it's wide open for whatever you haven't defined yet. And also, just as you see, I just looked at, okay, how long a phrase is that? And maybe, it's a multiple of 3 or 4 right away, and you don't have to go any further. You can see what it's already compatible with. What sense of motion is this asking to be put into? Right? So that's really helpful, knowing how many notes you're going to deal with before you even start. That can help. And so purposely using these different these patterns together, which we're going to get into in a lot more detail shortly. But the first half is going to be about just the interval relationships, okay? Next is going to be arpeggio shapes, okay? And I'm going to sum this up really quickly. Triads, you must know. Know your triads. There are 4 main kinds, and 2 that you definitely must know. Major and minor. And that includes the inversions too. So it's not all just that. It's also the inversions. But that is root, third, fifth, and then take the root, make that the highest note, third, fifth, and then the next root in the next octave, and then that same fifth, and then the next octave of the root note, and the next octave of the third, all that stuff. That's the same formula, 1, 3, 5, but how many, as we move up through the range, I might have A, C, E. A, C, E. Maybe I'll go for the next A. Here's my same C and E, but here's the A. And here's that E again from the first octave, but here's the next A and the next C. All right, these are inversions. Right, they're all A minor. They're all just the same 3 notes, but in different range, different relationships to each other, depending on how high or where can I access them? Where am I now, and where are the nearest, combination of 1, 3, and 5 for this chord? All right, so your triads, all right, you're going to have, there's 4 main forms if you're just dealing with the 3 notes, just 1 of each. 1 root note, 1 third, and 1 fifth, okay? And that's going to be on 1 string, so Eddie Van Halen style. I would definitely recommend you get to know your shapes for that. So basically from the root note, that's going to be 3 more frets, so plus 3 and then plus 4, right? So I'm at the 5th fret now, so plus 3 puts me at 8, and then 4 more is at 12, right? That's any chord you want it to be minor, or any arpeggio rather that you want it to be a minor arpeggio. Start from whatever root note, go up 3 frets, 3 additional, don't count the original, 3 additional frets, and then 4 additional frets. It'll be 7 half steps from whatever your root note is to the perfect 5th. Major is the other way around. 4 half steps, then 3. Okay? Now, there are no keys where you have a major and a minor on the same note, however. You're basically either in 2 keys, or at least you're dealing with something like harmonic minor. Switching between natural minor and harmonic minor does give you 1 instance where that happens. So, yes, I'm ready for the exception. But yeah, the 5th chord, all right, so A minor, A, B, C, D, E. In A minor, E is a minor chord. So. But in harmonic minor, it becomes that. So it gives you more of that sort of Spanish guitar kind of sound. Or maybe a little bit of a House of the Rising Sun kind of quality to it. But anyway, yeah, that's because you're raising the 7th in harmonic minor, 5, 6, 7. 7 becomes a major third instead of a minor third for the 5 chord. 5, 6, 7. 5 is your root note in this case of its own chord. 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. So it's 5, 7, and 2. But if the 7 goes up from where it was in a minor chord, now it is a major chord. Anyway, if any of this doesn't make sense, we probably have a lot of work to do. So go over to just open up a separate tab and just go to ShredMentor.com and just keep it ready for afterwards, because if you have a lot of questions, it's probably not going to be something where I can fix it for you in like a single conversation. But this is a worthy effort, and we should really work on it. because this is going to open up all the things you've ever wanted to do. This is possibly the most important lesson I'm giving away for free yet, really. Okay, so your arpeggio shapes, all right? You're going to have it on one string. To summarize here, let's move on here. All three notes on one string. And you're going to have two different versions where those three notes are on two strings. One note on the low string and two on the high string. The other way around, two notes on the low string and one on the high string. It's only two ways you're going to cut it when you take two strings and distribute three notes over them. So. And the final way is going to be to have them all on separate strings. So, but also there's what it's going to look like depending on the string combination. It's A, C, and E no matter what here. Right? But I'm on the 5th string, 4th string, 3rd string. Which fingers I use, which frets, how many frets apart they are, it's going to look a little different than if I do it on the 3rd and 2nd and 1st string. It's a little easier on the first 3 strings, in my opinion. So yeah, just that part alone. Just if you're only going to play just one of each of the 3 notes, you're going to have a lot of different variations here, just based on how you're going to distribute those notes. I think of it as the note layout. All 3 notes on one. There, just 3 notes on one string. Then the other note layout is 1 note, then 2. That's 1, then 2. Or the other note, the other reverse of that note layout, 2 notes, and then 1. And then finally, 1, 1, and 1. Or, right? And then you have all your actual sweep shapes, which you could sweep these a little bit, or sweep with them as well. So you have your Alright, so you have your major and minor. Again, you must know major and minor, but you're going to need to know diminished 7th, maybe augmented. I don't really tend to use that too much, but I know it, so anyway. But then you also have, variations of that. You might want to change a note out and get to 7ths. It's, typically, just like with strummed chords, you have repetitions of the same note in multiple octaves. So you can just sacrifice one of them to be its 7th instead, because it's going to be the next note over. Just slightly change one of them to get to the 7th, but you must know your triads, and they absolutely must know your major and minor. So get started, and what I did early on, I just started from G. I just learned, I adopted a default key. To me, that's just E minor. So when I said I'm going to play everything from A, and then a couple times so far I've already reached right for E, that's what that is. I have a default key, and frankly, it serves me very well, so I kind of recommend it for you too. Pick a key. I use E because it's the guitar key, or at least when I had a 6-string guitar, it was the guitar key. Now I have a lot of notes, so it could be a couple other notes too. Anyway, though, yeah, you have your sweep shapes, and you also just have your regular chord shapes in order to find that. So if you can identify, like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm right where I would put my finger for an E minor chord or something like that, it can help you find the important notes that go with that, because if that chord's playing right now, then at least 3 of the pitches, triad tones, are the notes that you are going to need in order to create melodies anyway. The best notes to play during a chord are the notes that make up the chord. Yes, you're going to play scales and stuff to make melodies, but frankly, most of them, the really important notes are the ones that are already the ones that make up that chord. So anyway, that is the next thing I'm going to touch on. I probably should have touched earlier, but knowing what every interval looks and feels like, okay, like a half step. I did actually a lesson on this last week with or maybe a couple weeks ago. But here's the thing, like, play a half step from A, right? Yeah, okay, that's one, of course. 1 half step. Take a note and then play the fret above it. Sure, that's one way, but that's not the only way. What about if they're not on the same string? Play the A over here. Where's the half step? All the way down here, 4 frets lower. Of course it's 4 frets lower because the string itself is 5 frets higher. Going to from the 10th fret of this string to the 10th fret of that string is like going up 5 frets. So that's like going up 5 frets, 4 frets, 3 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. It's the equivalent, or what I call the fretboard synonym. And it's something I tend to, it's my little nickname for things, basically multiple ways to play, specifically in interval. Don't get too attached to just one way. I would look for at least 2 ways to play every single interval. You're at least up to an octave. You know, beyond that is, you know, how often do you really need to play more than that, you know? Sometimes, yes, but mostly, you know, an octave, okay? Sure, up 2 strings and up 2 frets. So I'll start with this A here, your 6th string, 5th fret. Up 2 strings, up 2 frets. 5th fret, 6th string, 7th fret, 4th string. But what if I am here and I need to go up? It's also the next immediate higher string, 7 frets higher. So it's just look for at least 2 ways to play every single interval within the chromatic octave. Half step, whole step, minor third, major third, and so on. Everything all the way up to an octave. Up to and including an octave. Okay, so that is the first half of the show, which I've taken up a little bit more than the first half of the time for the show. But now we're going to start getting into a fairly rapid list. I'm going to give you a little description of each of these, but let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, wait, 11, yeah, 11 different strategies here, okay? So let's just dig right in. They're not in any particular order here, but I would recommend, first off, when you're dealing with a new scale, or a scale that you're just trying to really fully internalize, use what I call the open string strategy. And that is very simply, let the open string, pick any open string, it doesn't matter, but let that be the root note of it so that you can see what the interval spacing is and deal with it on one string. Open single string strategy is probably what I should call that. But A minor, there it is, A, right? Whole step, half step. Whole step, half step. Whole step, whole step. And you can, you know, you don't have to just, again, not really trying to recite scales up and down all the time. Let's turn it into like a tremolo, or maybe a surf rock. Anyway, just, you know, just something fun to do with it, but limit yourself to that, and you can use the open string as the root note. All right, now the next strategy, and this is one of those few cases where I do feel like it's kind of good to sort of graduate to that. Start with that first, and whatever type of scale it is, and it doesn't have to be minor. It could be, I don't know, whatever. It could be Dorian, which is like minor, but, you know, using the same string. But the Iron Maiden instrumental on the Power Slave album, Lost for Words. If you know that riff, you know the Dorian scale on one string. It's probably, frankly, I learned that riff so early in my life, that in my musical life, that's probably where I got this concept from. It's just riffs like that. It's just, you know, it's fairly easy, and once you know what, you know, from 0 to 12, you got 1 octave. That's the whole scale. So anything beyond that's just repeating the same thing anyway. So limiting yourself to 1 octave is actually kind of a good facet of that technique. But anyway, graduating to the next thing would be to purposely use the obscure keys strategy. And that is where your open string doesn't really play a role at all. You can take that same knowledge that you developed on a single string, but now you have to move the whole thing up. So you have to really remember the spacing that you were dealing with, not rely too much on the fret numbers. The fret numbers are definitely what you're going to need at first, so you know where to put your fingers, of course, where the notes are, but I hate to tell you exactly where to put your notes, which fret numbers. It's super overrated, and it stays that way because of tablature, but that isn't at some point you got to shift your focus over and start to pay attention to how far apart the notes are. So that is what the obscure keys strategy forces you to do, okay? And what I call the obscure key strategy is basically playing in a key where your open string is really not involved. It's not easy to play. You're not going to get these cool, you know. So all the really common, you know, E minor, A minor, D minor type stuff. In fact, most of these keys are going to be 1 fret above or below them. Okay, so yeah, those are that's pretty much it. So you have your E minor, right? So open E, 7th fret. All right, so play stuff at the 6th fret. E flat minor, F minor, a half step above. 8th fret, which means if you want to, you know, resolve your root note, you gotta fret everything, okay? And that is what this is about. You'll be able to not lose your place. Right? F minor, right? So just do like instead of B, you know, if you have a 7th string, you're probably tuned to B. Your 7th fret would be B also on the low E string. All right, go up a half step, play in C minor. Go down a half step from there instead, and play B flat minor instead. Yeah, basically about 1 fret off of where your actual notes actually would be on. That way, it rules out your open strings altogether, and it really makes you think. Everything has to be movable. All the cool, you do lose the cool open string stuff that you could do, but you also gain a great deal of self-sufficiency and mobility on the fretboard because you have memorized the important part, which is how far apart do these notes need to be? What does that shape have to look like, no matter what the dots under my fingers might look like? You're you're divorcing yourself from the thought of what is actually visually there, so that you're sort of projecting the visual of the spacing between the notes onto your fretboard so that your fingers can follow that instead, okay? Hope that makes sense. Again, if any of this is too much for you, it's because you're a human being and it's a lot. And this is the result of like 15 years of teaching here and thinking about this even longer than that. I've been obsessing over this stuff since at least 2003 when I was like, damn it, I want to shred and I can't figure it out. And I had to figure it out myself. I don't want you to have to do that because that was, looking back, I always feel like that was way harder than it needed to be. And once I figured it out, that's always how it felt. Like, oh, well, is that all it was? Thanks a lot. No, everybody. Thanks for nothing. And that's what I don't want you to feel, okay? So that's why I'm doing this. That's why I give you incredible amounts of free stuff every week in this session, unless the gods conspire to shut down my show and throw a violent storm at me. But otherwise, all right, moving on. Next one. Useful motor memory strategy. I can't stress this enough. This is basically only practice things based on the scales that sound like the music you want to make. Only practice useful stuff. Only practice patterns you can actually use. So count those phrases ahead of time. Remember earlier I was like, how long is a phrase like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, what do you know? That's 6 notes. That's a multiple of 3. I can use that in any triplet or sextuplet environment. Let's do some triplets now. We'll see. Right. Anyway, so you can just put it into motion right away because you count it ahead of time. So if you've ever struggled with like counting, I don't know how to count this. You count it first to see how many notes are in it. Look at what that number is and see if it's related to one of the really cool rhythmic numbers that are multiples of 2, 3, 4, or 6. And if it is, you're in luck. Just put it into motion. Pick if it's a multiple of 4, make it sound like 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and if we want to be proper in how to count 16th notes. But just E and are not numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, however, is very logical, and I want to put it in the English language in the way that we all learn how to count from the beginning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is how I count personally. As long as I can do it, it doesn't really matter what's going on in my head. And same for you. Okay, so that is the basis of the useful motor memory strategy is practice chunks of scales. And once again, going back to the universals here, second one is use sequences most of the time. That was a sequence. You know what I did to really do this kind of thing? Useful motor memory. I discovered by accident, purely by accident, the sequence of 6s, what I tended to call overlapping hexachords, which is just take 3 notes per string on 2 strings. So it's a And then while I'm on that string, I'm just going to replay the last 3 notes as the highest 3 notes of the next 3. Oh, sorry, the next 6. 6 notes. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now 3, 2, 1 from that pattern becomes the 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now that 3, 2, 1 becomes the 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is how I actually memorized my harmonic minor and natural minor scales really, really quick, because I would just go back and forth between the two. They're my 2 favorite scales and my 2 go-to or default types of scales anyway. So I just did that, and within like a month, I wasn't getting lost anymore. I knew exactly what the next shape was because I didn't do it that way. I would just go like, I would just deal with 3 strings, this 6-note pattern and this 6-note pattern, but the middle string had the same 3 notes, so it was really only 9 notes in all. That is a quick way to do that, right? So that's just using a specific, this is just honestly going, this is one way you can do it. It's just a simple method, a specific sequence that can help you to iron out, you know, what are the next 3 notes, because even though you're doing with 6 notes at a time, you only actually need to remember the 3 new notes that are not in the previous shape that you played. So that's just a little extra bonus thing in there. Just the sequence of 6s is a fantastic choice for learning your 3-note per string scales. So you heard it here. But yeah, more importantly though, the useful motor memory strategy is just whatever you do all the time, that's what your hand's going to start doing on autopilot. It might as well be things that actually sound like music, have a rhythmic length to them, are based on the scales that sound like the kind of music you want to make, not some random ugly sounding finger pattern with no musical value whatsoever because you picked it up from online somewhere. Look at your scales again. That's harmonic minor. If you're watching my show, it's probably harmonic minor or natural minor or minor pentatonic. Those 3. You need those 3 scales, I guarantee it, so you might as well start doing it with those. Okay, so anyway, that's useful motor memory strategy is patterns you can actually use rather than committing all kinds of things to motor memory, which are going to be your habits. That's the autopilot you're going to be riding on later when you free up your concentration to think about other things. So doing that kind of thing, but again, don't forget to build motor memory around transitions between things too, right? Which is what that is. That letting that note ring all the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't want it to be choppy. I don't want any delay between the notes. But same thing with doing the sequence of 6s up and down the same 2 strings. Oops. Right. So yeah, things like that. Knowing what the transition is going to be too. Getting your hand ready for that jump or that slide, or however you're going to approach it. That's got to be part of it too, because you're not going to have any kind of useful autopilot to lean on if you're not practicing the whole thing. Okay. So next, fretboard synonyms, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. Basically, when you have something for an interval, these next are kind of overlapping. All right, but fretboard synonyms for intervals or melodies, or what I also think of as the multiple locations strategy, which is sort of, you take something like, let's say, all right, so first off, sequence of thirds, twice from the 6th here, 6, 4, 5, 3, and then simply just 2, 3, 1. Okay, so the question you're asking yourself here next is, how many different ways can I play this? So that's what I think of as fretboard synonyms. A slight difference would be the multiple location strategy, which is how many different places can I play this, which would be, there is some overlap here, but it's basically how many different octaves, what's it going to look like on different strings. Or might have to use different fingers if the strings are tuned differently to each other, like the third and second string are only 4 half steps apart, whereas the other strings are 5 half steps apart. Now my 10 string has another major third in here, so and so on, right? So that's the multiple locations strategy. But how many different ways can I play this? In a way, this is where the fretboard synonyms thing comes in and can be a little bit more powerful, because I might not be trying to do find the same shape on every string from the same starting note, but maybe rather I might look for something more creative here. So like I might do like I might look for ways to have things ring over each other, with or without distortion. It would actually probably sound kind of pretty on a clean sound, to be honest. But moving right along, anyway, how many different ways can I play this? So look for ways that you can have, use your open strings if possible with the melody. It's more about like taking a melody or an interval and reapproaching it, especially taking notes that might have been right next to each other on the same string and putting them on different strings. What other locations can I do it in? I could also take a note and maybe move it to another octave, a lower octave or a higher one or something like that. So you get some really interesting new interpretations of your idea doing this kind of thing, and it broadens up your awareness of where that note also might be in different ways. Again, of fluency, not mastery. We're trying to become more fluent, and how can I convey this idea? Ooh, this extra quality comes out when I do it this way. So anyway, that's the combination there of fretboard synonyms, different ways to play it, and then multiple locations and multiple places on the fretboard that I could play. And that's why I have this ridiculously huge guitar today, to show you, I started on a 6 string like everybody, but I got a 7 string in 2001, and I had to find new locations for things. And the 8 string I got in 2012, I was like, okay, whoa, where am I? Same thing. I had to expand my knowledge of where the new locations are. I still had all the other ones, but I still had to get my bearings with the extra string, because the lowest string isn't the lowest string anymore. And I also had to find, okay, wow, so on the low F sharp of an 8 string, that low E string, that's actually the 10th fret. So I was like, wow, I just got to memorize that now. Now I got a 10 string, and I got to find find the E on everything. That's another good way you can kind of do that, by the way, which is the next one. Finding a specific note on every string. Just grab an E. Where is it? Okay, well, I got an A string, so that's going to be on this is the low E of a bass guitar. That one. All right, next string is D, so that's, next string up is a G string, so G, I have a G, that's your 9th fret, so I'm tuned a little weird. My lowest 4 strings are up a half step from where they normally would be, so my next one, where yours would be a B on the 7th string, mine's a C. So a C is a major third below E, and my power chord is like that. I do this for sleeping reasons. There's my D. Next string, E. That's easy, which means I like to do it between the open string and the 12th fret. This is actually a single note version of the multiple location strategy, by the way. So there's some overlap. But anyway, A, again, 5th fret, 7th fret. D string, again, 2nd fret. G string, again, 9th fret. B string, 5th fret. E string, once again, open and 12th. You can go and deal with the 12th fret through however many frets, up to 24 or more, if you want, but there's one of everything between the open string and the 12th fret. So, no, you don't really need to. I've never needed to. I know where they are anyway, because it's exactly the same thing, but half as small. It's tinier, but it's exactly the same thing up above. Okay, so anyway, that's finding a specific note on every string method. Define default and alternate fingerings. Okay, so I'm going to go back to what I was doing here. I might use like But I might use like, if I'm just doing this, I'll probably just use the standard one note, one finger per fret kind of approach. And you'll see why I moved it down in a second. If I'm going to go across the next two strings, rather than suddenly expand my entire hand, which is not that much of a problem, but it's just more to coordinate when my second finger is already at one of those frets, and my ring finger just has to get the hell out of the way. So really, I might just use fingers 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. That way, the whole way across, I'm just playing fingers 1 and 2 on all 4 strings. Now, it depends on what I have to do next, basically. That's why I might need an alternate fingering, because now, okay, you know, if I don't need the rest of those notes, I'll just use the most relaxed hand position I can. But if I know I'm going to be it saves me from having to move over, because now those fingers are just already where they need to be, and I don't really have as much work to do in a way. It's not as relaxed. You know, I am relaxed, but it's not as relaxing of a hand position, but it's a slight stretch that I'm able to maintain for a while, and it helps me, it facilitates what I'm actually trying to do a little bit better. So that's why I think I find it very useful to have a default fingering and then maybe the backup fingering, which is always just going to be the next finger over. But the default fingering goes back to what I said as far as starting to try to develop a useful motor memory. So pick a fingering and stick with it, because the sooner you make your decision and stop just using different fingers every single time, you're actually going to get that motor memory programmed sooner. But if you keep, you know, if you kind of sit on the fence, like, I guess I'll do it this way. Figure it out. It's your hand, okay? There's only so many. You know, which finger should play each one. Make a decision based on what seems like the most efficient use of your hand right now. Doesn't matter if you're wrong. Your hand will, you know, your hand will keep telling you it's a big pain in the ass to play this, and maybe it will just always be a big pain in the ass to play this. Who knows? But maybe that's just, some things are just, you know, harder than others. But if you made the best decision you can based on where your hand needs to be, and no finger just sort of going to waste when it's right there, and you're making some other fingers, you know, stretch unnecessarily to get to where another finger is right there already for you. Like, you know, as long as you're not doing that, you're probably doing fine. Okay, so sorry, I've got a window popping up on me. Okay, so now with that said, default fingerings mean you're going to establish useful motor memory sooner. So get that figured out, and I can help you with that. Once again, ShredMentor.com. Keep it open in another tab. If any of this is just too much for you to handle, again, it's because you're a human being, and this is a lot to juggle. This is why I can help you, because I do know how to juggle this. I now do this naturally, but I will help you to manage the system of doing this stuff regularly so that you don't have this problem. Okay, so the next one, okay? Practice resolving melodies to specific chords or chord changes. This is also going back to your trichords, tetrachords, pentachords, hexachords. That's why I cover that first. If you know that you have an E minor chord, let's switch to my default keyboard. And let's say you're inside of the scale, but you only allow yourself 6 notes to work with. Very good. This is one of those purposeful creativity with criteria. That's yet another strategy there. But anyway, let's say I only give myself those 6 notes to work with, and I need to resolve a melody to an E minor chord. Well, E, F sharp, G, A, B. So E, G, and B are the 3 notes that I need to kind of pay attention when I'm on them, because those are the notes that are going to resolve the melody. So let me just turn it down a little bit. Bring my E. I'm going to keep hitting my low E string a little bit, just so that I can kind of, you can hear that both. Oops. You can hear that the B and the G sound kind of more final against that. I don't even have an E in this shape. This is just starting from the F sharp This is the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the scale. So I don't even have the root note among my options. It's like I'm playing with less of a scale, or like it's one of those instruments that doesn't really have a very wide range, but it's even less than 1 octave, which is really weird. But let's just say that that's what you've got under your hands right now. How to make it work with what you have. That is the concept there. Eclipse 85. Hey, welcome. I'm not familiar with you. Are you actually on? Are you on Twitch? Actually seeing and hearing me? I don't actually do song requests and stuff like that, and I don't actually know Silosis, but I would like to listen to it, and you know, maybe I can do a little bit with improvising now. I'm not going to rule it out, but using someone else. Oh, it is okay. It is all black, by the way. Sorry about that. That really, I don't know how to fix that. And I have not been able to find how to fix that, but that is a problem on Twitch. I do recommend that you come over to the YouTube link on that, and what I could do if you're still, yeah, we're at 9 o'clock already, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do is leave this as a public thing. YouTube.com/ShredMentor is, thank you for doing that. Thank you for the request. I will definitely check out the song because I don't know it yet, and if it's, I'm hesitant to do anything that is specifically someone else's thing because I'll get a copyright strike. And I'm not like I don't know the song. I don't really know the band's sound off the top of my head, but which means I'm clearly not like buddies with them either. So I don't know if I can just ask them to do that. But I'll check it out and welcome. Let me make sure that I'm going to go ahead and set this this video to public real quick. But anyway, as I do that, let me jump back in here. There's only a couple more things to go, and I'm just going to keep going because I don't want you to miss out on any of this. Yeah, there we go. So I'll set this video to public so you can find it on my channel in the recent live stuff. Anyway, though, 2 other things. All right, so, sorry, 3 other things. So between resolving melodies to certain chords or chord changes, which is a big part of the ShredMentor backing tracks for the chord progressions that I offer on my site through Guitar Practice Tools. They're not like your standard song type of backing track that you would find in a compilation or a guitar magazine giveaway CD or something like that, or on YouTube or whatever. What my tracks are specifically for is this exact purpose. Is they're a chord progression. Sometimes a very simple chord progression with 2 chords just going back and forth, because I want you to, basically, that chord progression is a change that you are going to encounter again and again and again. It's one of the core sounds that you're going to need if you want to play metal, and you need to be able to be fluent in how to resolve melodies within that chord change. Sometimes that specific chord change between 2 chords might just be part of a longer chord progression where it also features those chords. That is the concept here, is that you need to be able to use pieces of your scale, no matter where you are, and resolve a melody back to any of the chords that might be there. If you have 3 notes under your fingers, you probably can do this with any chord in the key, frankly. You just have very limited choices. So you're going to have to do other things to make it interesting, which is fine. That's what rhythm is for. That's what phrasing is for. Okay? So you would graduate from this to doing it over not only chord changes, but full-on key changes. You know, and I listen to a lot of, like, black metal infused type things. I like black and death metal a lot lately. All right, so there's a lot of stuff. To me, the quintessential black metal chord change is you take a minor chord and then move down a major third to another minor chord. It's very dark and sinister right off of, you know. All right, you can just keep moving it down to, just keep moving it down in major thirds rather. All minor chords though, so you're actually going outside the key, so you can't just stay in the E minor scale, then you go over to the C minor chord, but you can use the G. Alright, so I'll try to self-harmonize here, so. Sorry, I I still get lost in trying to do classical guitar style self-harmonizing on this thing. But anyway, oh, horns up to you as well. Thank you. Yeah, I gotta write that. You know what? I got it on the video. I can just look. Leech xylosis. I don't want to forget, because once this video is over, I got a jet and I don't want to forget. Anyway, though, so that would be where you kind of graduate to after you get a little bit more comfortable with doing it within the same scale, because I guarantee you it's harder when you have to kind of keep a totally different scale and key in bypass mode and ready to go, sort of in your back pocket, waiting for that moment of the chord change, because that very moment is where you suddenly need to hit a note that sounds natural-ish coming from whatever you just did. So let's say, you know, something like, I'm going to do something at 16 notes long that would go with E minor, and then land on a note that falls into the C minor chord and key, so probably G at that point. So like so I just did a sequence of 3s over 6 notes to get a quick. So it's basically a broken up sequence of 4s. 4, 3, 2, 1, go back a note, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I came back up to the G and lucked out that just happens to be where I am. So let's try to get that and then so hopefully that kind of makes sense there. But yeah, that's a lot harder because you have to plan. Like, oh crap, I gotta jump over to that note. Oh, I'm not even in the same key anymore. So you really gotta like cancel clear on what you've been holding on to in your mind, and right on a beat switch to another key. So it's harder. So you work up to that a little bit, but it's the same skill set really. Last two here are the scale comparison strategy. I mentioned this already earlier, but I spend a lot of time doing things with natural minor and harmonic minor. A really quick way you can save some time is alternate back and forth between them within the same exercise without stopping whatsoever. Right? So the first 6 notes of natural minor and harmonic minor are the same. It's the 7th that's raised. So let's do something that uses the 7th. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. I'll just simply ascend 6s. 3, 4. Now raise the 7th. Back. Right? And do this with anything that you might happen to be doing. But just by doing that, you have to pay attention to which note is actually different between the two scales. Essentially, these are the two versions of this shape within that particular scale. The mode 2 has a hexachord that happens to have that note raised. So what does it mean for your hand? What finger is going to play it? Which finger is going to have to move to where it might not have been before? What's it going to mean for your technique in general? It forces you to be looking for, what's different about this in order to make this happen. Which one of these notes out of this shape is note 7? You know, so from starting from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 at natural minor. Now I'm going to switch from using my middle finger to my ring finger. Usually do like 2 to 4 repetitions each, but when I really want to test my ability, I'll do it 1 time each and go back and forth like that. So that's a quick way you can do it. I call it the scale comparison strategy, because you're actually practicing 2 different scales at the same exact time and learning what is different about them so that you can switch more easily on a whim, just as you like, which is really helpful because those are probably the 2 most common scales to use in a neoclassical style. So for me, super useful because that's my main style. My other one being blues-infused rock. Anyway, last. Actually, it's 2 levels of this too, but basically say the scale degree number as you play each note, all right? So if I'm playing through my scale, you know, like, don't just go, not fret numbers. That's not helpful. 8, 5, 7, 8, no, not helpful at all. But 6, 4, 5, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 4, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. 2, 3, 2, 1, 6, 4, 7, 5, 3, 1, right? I know exactly which note I'm playing from the scale at all times. I didn't start here, but I did this activity until I am now here. I can do this. I know exactly which note it takes extra work to say it out loud, but that's part of the point. You have to think it to say it, and that's the point. All right, so do this a lot. If you don't do anything else I told you here tonight, do that. And now this is the final thing I'll leave you with here too. But to graduate from that, take the guitar out of the picture altogether and do the same thing and sing the scale degree number without a guitar. 6, 4, 5, 3, 2. Oh, sorry. 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. Raise 7, 2, 1. 6, 4, 5, 7, 6. 4, 5, 3, 2, 7, 1. Yeah, a little bit of harmonic minor, a little bit of natural minor, but I knew exactly which note. I misspoke because I changed notes on me there. But yeah, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7 from harmonic minor, 2, 1, 5, 3, 2, 1. Right, I know exactly where I'm in the key. I don't need this. I already installed this thing up here. All right, and you can do that too. This is everything I've done, I've talked to you about, I've personally done, and it worked. So I've already filtered out all the crap that doesn't get you anywhere. I know about it. I'm trying to steer you away from it because I want you to get better, faster results, because this isn't supposed to be as hard as it's been made out to be, but there's a lot of things at fault, and it's not you. So anyway, if this is overwhelming, again, it's because you're human, and there's a lot going on here. If you would like help with your guitar playing and your fretboard knowledge in particular, and along with it comes your ear training and your theory knowledge, go over to ShredMentor.com, fill out the form, and set up a free introductory consultation with me right now. I'm doing a lot of things in the background where I'm only taking on a very limited number of new students for this program now at this point, because I'm developing a much more insane program that involves all of this, but it's going to cost a lot more than my regular lessons. So right now, if you want to get in, while I'm still taking on regular lesson students, this would be a very good time. Go to ShredMentor.com. Tell me the most detailed answers you can to the questions in that form, and then it'll redirect you to the booking page, and you can set that up, and we'll go ahead and meet over a new platform. I don't even use Skype anymore. I use something even better called Forte, but you'll get the link as soon as you set it up. So. And yeah, we can talk about your goals and the specific things you're trying to achieve, and and maybe we're touching on some things that are part of what you need to be able to do to get there. But whatever's in your way right now, whatever's obstructing you from getting where you're trying to go, let's stop struggling, stop spinning your wheels, and just get you there already. All right. So I would love to help you. This is my passion. And in addition to playing, I like helping people get there so that they can do cool things they could never do before. It's quite the reward for me. So anyway, that is it for tonight, and thank you very much for joining me. One more time, we look at that here. Leech silosis. I'm going to write it down before I forget. And I will, once again, I don't know your name, so thank you for joining me tonight on the show. But go ahead and go over to youtube.com/ShredMentor, and you'll find this set to public. I set all these videos to unlisted at first, but I'll go ahead and give you a rewatch status if you feel like doing that. And that way I'll be able to find it again too. But yeah, Leech silosis. Got it. All right. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. And I will be back again next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time as usual. So rock on, my friends.